to this in Women in Retail, but we were a little bit nervous as this is the first event, just wondering how would it go and would you all arrive, and feel a bit nervous, and we didn't want anyone to be on their own. And clearly we didn't need to worry. So this is the most fantastic buzz. So first of all, welcome. I'm Karen Richards. I'm the founder of Women in Retail, which very scarily was almost 11 years ago now. Women in Retail was set up, kind of founded through, I guess, for me, a personal experience. In my retail career, I worked at somewhere called The Pier for 10 years. Some of you are way too young to remember that, sadly. But I was in love with my job. I was in love with retail. I'd been a retailer since I was actually 13, 14, if you count the Saturday job. And I loved my career, but got to a point where I struggled. And at a point where I struggled, I didn't have a community of any like-minded women around me, and I certainly didn't have any role models, and I didn't really know what to do next. So I went off to the Middle East. But whilst I went off to the Middle East and did a retail consultancy there, something had started to pull together, which was basically a network for women who had some like-minded experiences. And over the last 10 years, we built that community, like-minded women, most of them very senior and continuing to progress in their retail careers, to bring together a fantastic network of women who one day, the vision always was, would be able to give back to you. The next generation of retailers coming through. You are our future. You're also fantastic women. You're also brilliant at shopping. You're brilliant at business. You've got a whole different view and attitude on the world that our generation have had, but it's changed again significantly. And what we wanted, and I wanted Women in Retail to do, was to basically help make your path a little bit easier. So here we are today. How Women in Retail has evolved through the last 10 years. We gradually built up a network of events, 3-4 events a year, breakfast to lunch. And during that time, built a database of, I guess, I call it database, that sounds quite harsh, doesn't it? But built a wonderful community of women who gradually came from all different types of retail. And we got to the point where we needed a board of trustees. And where we needed a board of trustees, that for me was the turning point to say, okay, what are we doing? Are we listening? Are we able to create something that really is going to be in a position to give back, and also give that community of accomplished women themselves, who also enjoy a bit of support every now and again too, give them somewhere that they would enjoy coming along. So the trustees, and I'm going to mention them by name tonight, you're going to meet a few of them in more depth in a bit, because they're part of the panel. But the trustees, Fiona Brio, who's here this evening. Hello. Fee, hi. Denise, who's also here this evening. Karina, who is co-hosting at the back there.
I'm missing a glass.
Would you like a glass? We can give you a glass. No? Carolyn, who's also with us as well this evening, the trustees. Jill, who's going to be co-emceeing this evening. And then Katrina Nurse, who works for Selfridges, who can't be here this evening and is gutted. And Laura White, who also was Personnel Director at John Lewis, she also can't be here. And then the reason for introducing the trustees to you is there was another trustee called Fiona Davis, who is this lovely lady here. So Fiona and I go back 8 years.
A while.
It's a while. First and foremost as great friends. Then Fee, with her expert head on as being basically a brand and customer expert, helped me understand what Women in Retail is, what our core values are, what we're all about, and started to help me think about how we were going to take this forward and what we were going to do. It's a great privilege to have grown Women in Retail over the last 10 years. It's also something that I take very seriously, because we feel that we always want to listen and make it bigger and better. And Fiona has been an instrumental part of helping all of us, but me, understand what Women in Retail is. It then got to a point in her kitchen one day where she basically offers me a room, and when I'm working in London, I get to bunk over as well. And I asked Fiona if she would consider joining me in running Women in Retail for 2 reasons. First and foremost, it's a bit lonely sometimes, and although I've got a great board of trustees, they're very busy with their own day jobs. But also because founders make really pants leaders to take their businesses forward really, truly in the right way. We're too in love with our babies. We know what we do, we know how we do it, and we're not great sometimes at being open to all the different things that you need to do. And I share that with you in the spirit of complete openness, because some of you will work in founder-led businesses, and you will know that those founders are passionate and they're great and they're inspirational to work with, and at the same time, they can also be a little bit stuck in their ways. So Fiona, my wonderful trusted friend, who had already contributed a huge amount around the brand, very stupidly agreed to join me as my partner and run Women in Retail with me. She brings an element to this which is part of what this evening's all about, which is the true content. I can create this atmosphere, I can faff around to my heart's content, make sure the seats are okay and everything else. The great bit is, okay, and what are we giving back to you? What are we learning from you? What can the panel share that can help you and enrich your careers and enrich your lives? Fiona leads our thought leadership on that. She's wonderful. She brings every skill that I don't. And in a minute, I'm going to hand over to her after I've sufficiently embarrassed her. We now lead it together. We also have a fabulous team within Women in Retail who now support us. So Anna and Nikki, if I could ask you both to say hi. Nikki and Anna. Anna and I have worked together for 8 years, building up Women in Retail. Nikki joined us just over a year ago and is in charge of our membership. And she's the person that you'll all be interacting a lot more with. We have Patrick here this evening, who's doing the headshots over here. We also have Vaskin, who's with us, who is the person doing, thank you Vaskin, who's been a darling doing the audio and the visual. And then we have Emily and Alex. Where's Emily and Alex? They're downstairs. Okay, well, they could probably hear us. Downstairs, who've been doing a brilliant job of making sure no one is on their own this evening. And that's first and foremost the number one thing that we want. No one to be on their own, no one to be huddled in a corner thinking, why am I here and I don't know anyone. We will work very hard to make sure that doesn't happen for you this evening. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Fiona now, just to tell you a little bit more about what to expect from this evening and how we want you to participate.
Well done, Caro. Not sure how I follow that. So I'll follow it by just describing what we're trying to achieve for you here, which is this evening it's not scripted. We haven't got a presentation for you. We haven't got a whole host of content. What we wanted to create was a conversation. And we've put together some thoughts in terms of how we stimulate that conversation. But we really want you to talk with us and talk to each other. And we believe that out of great conversations, great sharing takes place. And so this is the start of the community of emerging leaders for women in retail. We think we've got lots of great ideas about how we might be able to help you in your careers, but you know much better than we do. And so we really want to hear from you during the evening and afterwards, and to share your thoughts and ideas about how we can help you. That's really what it's about, first and foremost. The panelists are here to share a little bit, and I'm one of them, to share a little bit about our experience and our stories, personal and professional, really just to get the conversation going, and to help you feel that perhaps you know a little bit about us before you ask questions and before we get into a little bit more of the exploration. Is that okay so far? Everybody quite relaxed? Apart from us. Apart from us. Back to you.
Over to your spot then. Okay, so just while
now
Fiona
I've got to get on the
takes her
stool.
place on the panel.
This isn't the easiest part of the evening.
So what we're going to do is we're going to run now this part of the evening, and we hope it's going to last until, it will last until about 7:45. 7:45, we're going to invite the panellists to go over to the breakout areas, and you'll be able to go and join any of the panellists that you'd like to ask more questions, chat to in a bit more detail. At that time as well, we'll serve food and some wine. In addition, we have some Women in Retail members this evening who will also be knocking around, as well as myself, for you to come and interact with and chat with. And I'm just going to read out their names and ask them to stick their hands up if they don't mind. So we've got Fiona Lambert here. Thank you, Fiona, at the back. We've got Helen Milford here. There we go, Helen's also at the back. You're all at the back, ladies. Jo Whitfield. Okay, at the back. Sarah Lomax and Vicky Hill. Okay, lovely. So basically, I think there's a little bit of a rule of thumb here, is that if we look like we're more wrinkly than you, it's probably a good chance we're one of the more senior and accomplished women here this evening. So let's face it. Okay, so please feel really comfortable and confident to come and talk to us afterwards. We'll close at 8:45. We'll finish at 8:45 for finish at 9 o'clock. 2 requests. One in this part of the evening. If you could keep your phones on silent, please. However, we would love you to tweet and Twitter to your heart's content throughout the evening and afterwards, and tell everyone about the event and what you think. Patrick will be available as soon as this is over, and I know a lot of you would love to have your photograph taken, and we'll get as many done as we possibly can. So he'll be available as soon as we've finished as well. So I'm now going to hand over to Jill, one of our trustees. My job is going to be at the back, helping you to interact in a little bit. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Karen. Thank you. Hi, good evening, everybody, and welcome. I know I've got a nervous panel, and I think I've got a nervous audience, but hopefully the way I look at it is that we're having a glass of wine with a few girls, and let's enjoy ourselves. So my name's Jill Ross. I'm a trustee of Women in Retail. I'm also a partner of a consultancy called Elixir. We are a sponsor of Women in Retail. But I'm delighted to be here tonight because I started my career in retail, in Marks & Spencer, and I'm originally from York. So I'm always delighted. Oh, we've got a fellow Yorkie here. So I'm always delighted to be back in the north. So the format of the evening, to explain, is I'm going to ask the panel, and there's a couple of panel members I know who've not yet been introduced either by name, so there's a bit of secrets here. I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves for a couple of minutes, and I've already told them that means a couple of minutes. And then we're going to kick off. I've got some questions to start stimulating the conversation, but as both Karen and Fiona said, tonight's about the opportunity to ask, share some of the things you've got on your mind, and clearly there's an opportunity here with such a variety of different retailers in the room to kind of ask different questions. So if that works for everybody, let's get started. So I believe the first person to start introducing themselves is Fiona. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of your personal and professional? You're right, we've got two Fionas. So they're already fighting. Fiona Davis.
Away you go.
Fiona Davis, would you like to start to introduce yourself, please?
Certainly. Yes, I'm passionate about women in retail. I also run my own business. In the last 2.5 years, I set up the Brand Inspiration Company. I help businesses who are either a small to medium size, who've got stuck, or who want to take that next big step, or startups who really want to get launched in the first place. I always look at things from the customer's perspective. I talk about walking in the customer's shoes. I've been passionate about that for forever, really. But the first time I got passionate about that was when I was working for BHS, and little did I realise that I was about to make quite a big career change after about 14 years of being a buyer, that I was going to make a move to being a marketeer and a brand person and a customer person. And that was after I'd had my first baby, Emily, who's actually here tonight. She's no longer a baby. And I went back to work after maternity leave, and it was quite a big change in my sort of focus, really, as I think it is for a lot of people. I've had a career of contrasts. I've worked for Tesco and Harvey Nichols. I've worked for Early Learning Centre and Ann Summers. I've worked for, which, yes, there is some
that always brings that always brings the
They're all toys, ladies. I've worked in fashion. I worked for Wallace, but I've also worked in home and very different environments. I didn't go to university, but I ran a master's course at the University of Westminster, which was quite an eye-opener. I realised that I'm not an academic, and dealing with academics is actually quite tough, but dealing with students is great fun and immensely rewarding. And so for me, it's all about finding the difference, never feeling you've learned everything, but always enjoying every day, as I have with my retail career. I've absolutely loved every minute. There have come to points in my career where I'm not loving it quite as much as I used to, and that's the point at which there's some kind of crossroads happening, and that's really okay. I've learnt that. Didn't necessarily know it at the time, but I've learnt that, and moving on is really important. I think that must be my time's up.
I was going to say, I was about to move on,
Very
so
good.
thank you very much. So Fiona Briot.
Okay, so that set a pretty high bar for me. So good evening, everybody. I'm Fiona Briot, married to the long-suffering Andy, and I'm a mum of one, a little girl called Ella, who's 8 years old. And trying to get 24 years into 2 minutes is a pretty tall order. So I'm going to canter through. And the way I was going to do it is just describe who I've worked for and a couple of things that perhaps I've learned at each of those stages to share with you. So I joined M&S as a graduate. I joined actually with Amanda Cox, who sat on the front row from Dunelm. And I joined as a science graduate. I loved the commercial and the people side of the business. So I changed tack, and through 13 years in M&S, both in the UK and Europe, became a generalist. So I've done operations, HR, trading, marketing, store development. 13 amazing years. What did I learn? Be really brave and bold, and it's okay to change the course of your career. And please make sure you do something that you love. It makes a massive difference to how you perform and how you feel at home. I then joined Asda Walmart under the George brand, and I had 11 amazing years with them. Again, I did lots and lots of different jobs. And the two big things I learned there were being a generalist is a really good thing, because you can join the dots around the business, and whatever your role is, you understand the perspective of the other directors around the table. So I think it helps me make broader-based decisions and to ask different questions. The other amazing thing I learned at Asda, and it really comes from the Walmart days, is it's not just what you do, it's not just the results, it's how you do it. And I know there's a lot of Asda Walmart people in the room. What and how are 50-50 in the way that you lead your team and the way that you lead yourself in the organisation. I then left Asda under a restructure, had 9 months off with my family. I decided I could try and have another baby and get maternity leave, or take some garden leave, and the garden leave seemed easier than having another baby. And I got really heavily involved in helping Karen with some of the work that we've brought together today. I'm now with the Pets at Home group, and I'm on the business services and veterinary side, which is very, very different. It's a completely different sector. And what I've learned is it doesn't matter what the job description is, it doesn't matter what the product is, it doesn't matter what the sector is. You take everything that you've learned and you can apply it to any job. So your crossroads analogy, when you get to that crossroads, it really doesn't matter which way you turn. There is an amazing job at the end of it.
Agree.
So quick counter through 24 years and a couple of things that I've learned along the way.
And what have you learnt this evening already?
What I've learned this evening is when you get up in the morning and you put on a skirt like this, please make sure you're not sitting on a high stool. Yeah.
Key lesson learned.
It's a bit of a nightmare, but yes.
I'd like to also now introduce Emma Louise, who I don't think we've yet touched on.
No, not yet.
From Avon. So, Emma, can you explain a little bit more about your background?
Certainly, thanks, Jill. I'm really delighted to be here this evening. I've been a member of Women in Retail for a couple of years now, and I must admit, my narrative to you tonight is probably going to be about relationships. I think my career of 21 years is largely in the buying sector. So I started out as a graduate from Leeds University, so I feel like I've come home. And in fact, when I checked into the hotel, the receptionist was asking me, where did I go clubbing? And I couldn't remember, so that made me feel old. But anyway...
I thought you were going to say she remembered you from...
No, thankfully not. Thankfully not. So it's with great pleasure that I'm here this evening, and my narrative is going to be about relationships because for me, my people and the people I've touched and who's touched me on my journey have really made my experience what it is today. So I started out as a graduate trainee with Phoenix in Bond Street. So I went as a little graduate, fresh from uni. I'd been interviewed in the Milk Round, and I'd been interviewed by M&S and Jaeger and Phoenix. And I was very grateful and lucky to get the opportunity with Phoenix. I spent about 6 years in Bond Street, which was excellent because the chairman, Mark Fenwick, was actually based in Bond Street. And I suppose my tip is that when opportunities arose, I took them. So when someone very senior left to go to Calvin Klein, I actually wrote a letter to Mark Fenwick and just said, You probably don't know who I am, but I'm really hungry. I really want an opportunity. Could you just give me 6 months on this category? I'd really like to rewrite the strategy and obviously then evaluate. And I think actually sometimes pushing myself forward without the title or the financial recognition and saying, look, just give me the chance, let me show you, has probably been one of my best formulas, if you like. So that was excellent. I then left there and went to Harrods as a senior buyer, and I really enjoyed that. I was then approached by a couple of ladies from the city who were setting up a luxury brand. And to this day, I don't know why they came and spoke to me, really, because I had to sign a disclaimer before they would tell me what it was. And then when they announced it was a luxury sex brand, my infamous reply was, where's the wine gone? I was in an interesting position then, because again, at a crossroads, I wasn't looking to leave Harrods. I'd not long been there, to be fair, so it wasn't part of a plan. But sometimes opportunities come along, and the brand in question was actually Myla, M-Y-L-A, myla.com. Interestingly, in the room today, Anna Lockwood, who is supporting women in retail, and she's at the back of the room, worked with me at Myla. I became the buying director for Myla, so this is back in the early 2000s. We launched with a mail order catalogue and online, and then we put pop-up stores into Selfridges and Liberties, standalone stores in Paris, New York and London. So there was a lot of diversity to the role, which I loved. But I got to a point where I realised I'd just been in luxury, and I really felt I was missing that piece about mass market and volume. And I think as a buyer, as a product engineer, I really wanted that experience. So I then went to work for Philip Green at Arcadia Group. He'd just bought Arcadia Group, so that was a very interesting experience. He obviously is hugely successful, and certainly he was in probably his heyday then. I was actually signing off product directly with him, which was just an amazing experience, and it also gave me a real opportunity to travel to the Far East. With Myla, we'd done a lot of sourcing, and I'd sort of set that sourcing strategy to be quite European because of the luxury nature of the product. But actually going to the Far East was a great experience, and I'll never forget my first time in Hong Kong, and I still get excited. There's a few of my colleagues here tonight who know how excited I get every time I go to Hong Kong and I've got someone who's going for the first time, because it just reminds me of that wide-eyed person I was many years back, and it's just a great experience. So after Myla, after Arcadia, I then decided to set up my own business. That was something I did for about 7 years. And I think, again, pushing yourself outside your comfort zone and trying things, there is no wrong way to take your career. For me, it was something I really wanted to try and do. I really enjoyed it. What lured me back into the retail world and working for a company was an opportunity with Ann Summers. So, again, relationships here. Fiona and I had the pleasure of working together at Ann Summers, and I went there to head up buying on the fashion side. We had some very interesting product meetings, I recall.
Unforgettable.
I'll say no more. So again, that was an amazing experience. And it's just wonderful to see that years later, we're all still networking together, we're still in contact with each other. It was wonderful to see Anna when I came along to Women in Retail as Fiona's guest. And as I say, that was a few years ago. I then took the opportunity to move on to Avon, which is where I am now. And in terms of the reasons for that, it's an international company. I hadn't had the international experience. So I suppose I've given myself some signposts along the way of things I thought I wanted to do, but I've also pushed for opportunities.
Thank you very much. Leonie, would you like to introduce yourself? Leonie Foster from Dunelm.
Yeah, hello. It's not good going nearly last, especially
keep it short, and then we can crack on to the questions.
Sure, okay. So yeah, I'm marketing director at Dunelm. I've been there about 6 months, and I look after most of our customer touch points, so the store design and development, customer insight, marketing and brand communications, and the web business. Quite a broad role for me, and the broadest I've had so far. My career, I've worked for about 6 companies now in about 17 years, which when I thought about it sounded like an awful lot. It sort of broadly splits into three three phases. So I spent the first 5 years of my career with retailers, firstly with Kingfisher on their graduate scheme, and then with Sainsbury's, doing lots of different commercial jobs, which all seemed desperately important at the time, and in retrospect was just a really good grounding in people and retail and how stuff worked from end to end. I then moved on to be a strategy consultant for about 6 years, which was definitely an amazing period of career acceleration, literally because you work sort of about double the hours of anyone else, so it sort of counts as a lot more years. And it was mainly retail work. I learned lots about businesses and customers and problem solving, all of which I was very interested in, and all of which have been really useful after the period of consultancy that I had. And then after that, I went back to retail, and so for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been back in retail in marketing roles, and I spent 5 of them with Tesco, and then left last year and joined Dunelm. I've thought, ahead of tonight, I was thinking about what difference being a woman has made and whether that's been a good thing or a bad thing. And I couldn't really work it out. I'm not sure if it's made it easier or harder. I've definitely worked in a lot of very male environments, and Tesco was incredibly male at a senior level, in fact very macho. Even if you were a woman, it was still quite a macho environment. And consulting was very male. So for a few years in my early 30s, I was the most senior woman in the firm, which seemed ridiculous. And I didn't think at the time it made much difference, but when I was thinking about it for tonight, I realised I'd run the projects on female hair removal, tampons, sex toys and lingerie. So I think on balance there probably was a bit of gender stereotyping going on, even if I didn't realise it at the time. And I also thought a bit about, you know, what I've learnt along the way. And at this stage in my career, sort of late 30s, a lot of my close friends have given up on working really hard on their careers. They've taken time out, they're having families, they may come back to it, but they don't know at the moment. And it's quite a hard period, really, because actually it becomes sort of slightly harder to relate to them. I think it's harder for them to relate to me. And something I've begun to really value in the last couple of years is my female network that I've built up through my career. And probably never more so than when I left Tesco at the beginning of last year. I left, I had quite a lot of time off afterwards. I left as part of a restructure as well, so that was no fun at all. And I really, really valued my female network. I built it almost without realising, actually. But they were a group of women, mainly, who really, really helped me think about what to do next. They helped me emotionally and practically. They introduced me to people. They helped me really think about what I would enjoy doing. So I've really come to value that, but actually more recently, in the last couple of years of my career have been huge for learning. I've learnt lots personally. I learnt at Tesco a lot about leadership. I've been very task focused, and when the shit hit the fan, there was not a lot of point organising people to do stuff. You just had to sort of spend some time together. So really, really valuable period for me. And I had a little bit of a think about what I thought was most important career-wise ahead of tonight.
Hold. You're going into the questions again. Okay, so now we've got to hear the panel in terms of their backgrounds, and you can hear there's already some interesting stories. Before I kick off with questions, just out of interest, does anyone have a burning question they wanted already to throw their hand up in the air? Excellent. Thank you.
Hi, ladies. I would just like to know what career advice would you give to your younger selves?
So whoever, who'd like to throw that out? So what career, the question was, great question, that was on the list. We have very few questions, so I'm going to rely on you, I'm going to say it. So the question is, what career advice would you give to your younger self? Fiona, I'm going to ask you to answer that one straight away.
Mine's really simple, and that's do something that makes you happy. And it might not be what you're doing now. And if it's not, then find something that you will be happy doing. And I kind of fell upon that during my career, but that's what I would give myself a good talking to as I came out of university.
Okay, great.
I might be a few more years ahead then.
Thank you. Leonie, what would you say?
Probably two things. One was the network thing I mentioned earlier. So I would say you've probably already started building your network and maybe haven't even realised you've done it. This chair. I would say really think about that quite consciously, value it, enjoy it. The other thing is calm down and relax a bit. I was very anxious to get going. I was very anxious about progression, and actually opportunities turn up sometimes when you don't expect them. Things that seem like quite a bad situation often lead to a much, much better one, that crossroad point again. So I'd probably tell myself to calm down and relax a bit, to be honest.
Denise?
Be yourself.
Be yourself.
And be passionate about what you're doing.
Okay. So in terms of being yourself and confidence, etc., how have you all become confident and successful, do you think? What's helped you along the way?
I think the answers to the earlier question help to shape this, because if you're doing something you're really happy doing and you're really passionate, and actually in my role now with Avon, I know that every day we're making a difference to women's lives because we have an army of representatives who are our sales force, and it's through working for us that they're able to support their families. So I've got that belief, and I think it's easier to project confidence. It's easier to feel the passion if you're happy. And I think the previous answers help you, because if you're in an uncomfortable place and space and you feel put down and you don't feel you've got any role model or mentor, the only thing that's going to drive you forward is your self-belief and your own confidence. So you've got to shape that yourself. You can't rely on other people to give that to you. And I think if you anchor it to the things that you're passionate about, then it helps to pull you through what will be, difficult times. I think what's interesting is everyone's had highs and lows, and actually it's the tenacity to keep going that comes from within. So,
Right. Fiona Davis, anything to add?
I suppose it's a build on what everybody's said, but I actually think that sort of sense of, I don't think of myself as a particularly confident person, actually. Certainly my younger self was not confident in that way. But what I've been able to achieve is a sense of self-belief, which definitely does come through really loving what I do and being in the right place. Well, it's not just about work, it's being in the right place with the right people, doing what you feel is the right stuff, whether that's personally, professionally, or whatever that is. And one of the things that has really made a difference to me is actually learning from the tough experiences. You learn so much more, and it is a bit of a sort of overused comparison, but I think we learn so much more from the tough times than the good times, and realizing that actually having that challenging experience is really sort of building and useful and great is wonderful, and knowing that some of that happens and that the tough stuff helps you. I think if I'd known that when I was younger, I would have found that very useful too, because it would have sort of seen me through that.
Thank you very much. Any more questions from the floor? Great. Let's start getting the microphone. Is it one of those where it's like the ball, you throw it over your head and it's got to get to the back?
Thank you, ladies. It's been very inspirational so far. You talked about challenges. Can I just ask who or what has been your biggest challenge and how have you overcome it in your career?
On the people front, I think some of the biggest challenges I've had is when you end up working for somebody who has just got a completely different set of values in how they treat you or the organisation or your customers. And knowing what types of people they are is the first bit, and then you figure out your coping mechanism. Yep. I know exactly who likes my blue touch paper in every meeting that I might go into, but you do have a choice. You don't have to stay in that particular part of a business or that particular business. So understanding who causes you to feel a lack of confidence or who can start to undermine you is the
And
first
how do you then
bit.
deal with that in that situation? How do you deal with it, knowing that that person is going to like your touch paper?
So the first bit is recognising it, because I think very often you can sit there and think, why do I feel like this about a particular meeting? And it's not the topic, it's not that you're not prepared, you know your stuff, and you figure out that it may be a person in that room or a person in that meeting. And once you've figured it out, you can work out how you're going to cope with that. What it does do is crystallises for you the kind of people you want to work for and with, and the kind of person you want to be. So your message about out of some of the challenges comes some great learning. And I know exactly I don't want to be like a couple of people I've worked for over the 20 years.
Thank you.
Make choices.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely, please.
Hi, you've all spoke about great opportunities that you've had throughout your careers. Have any of you had any setbacks, and how have you bounced back from the setback?
Lots.
Loads. I think my biggest setback was last year. So I'd been at Tesco for about 5 years. I'd led customer insight during that time, and Tesco had become famously detached from the customer, so that was a pretty difficult situation. And I had worked really, really hard at Tesco, led bigger and bigger teams, had been having amazing career success on a personal level, even though the business was really, really struggling. And actually last January, they didn't have a role for me that I wanted anymore, and that was a huge shock to my system. I'd seen it coming probably for a little while, but I'd found it sort of pretty hard to believe until it happened. And it was really, it was really, really tough. And actually, in terms of confidence, it gave me a real knock. I was also, in the run-up to that, had been pretty devastated about the effect on the business of the things that had been happening. So, to your point about the effect on people, I'd gone through a period where the organisation was in a terrible state. I'd had to make many of my team redundant. We didn't really know how things were going to play out, and reputationally, the company was in a bad place. And then for me personally, everything went a bit wrong. So I would say that was a pretty major setback. I hadn't had many till then. It had been quite glittering, really. I'd always had more opportunities. It had gone pretty well. So I think it was probably, or apparently, so people tell me, terribly good for me. And at some point, I'm going to agree with that. But it really did give me the opportunity to go and look for something I'd rather do, and people I'd rather work with, and a culture I'd rather be part of. And Dunelm is great. It takes me ages to fall in love with something, and I fell in love with Dunelm pretty quickly. But I simply probably wouldn't even have looked at that opportunity if I'd still been very wrapped up in that world. And one of the things that gives me confidence is working in a culture where I feel my values are very aligned with what business is doing, and I'm working for someone who I really respect and that I feel I can learn from. And actually, all of those things had changed at Tesco, and I hadn't even really realised. Yeah. So, massive setback, but and something that took a little bit of time to recover from. But I, couldn't be happier now that it's happened. So my advice would be, when it happens, don't worry. There's lots of other opportunities out there, and whether you make the choice to leave somewhere or somewhere makes the choice for you to leave, and it will happen in your career, it's kind of inevitable. There's so much more out there. It's actually just on to the next, really.
Thank you. Anyone else in the panel with a different challenge that they face that they want to talk about, how they come back from a setback?
I had an experience a long time ago. I've had lots of setbacks since this, but an interesting experience I had when I was actually at BHS. And I had a great career experience at BHS up to that point, for all sorts of reasons, both in buying roles and then in brand marketing roles, and including a fantastically successful advertising campaign, which was sort of, I suppose, before reality TV kicked in, and it was just, we had a ball and we drove sales. It was great, but it was also a very, very political environment, and I was not senior enough to be part of that politics, but I was senior enough to be kind of on the receiving end of it, particularly as I was responsible for a £10 million advertising campaign, which at that stage was even more money than it would be today. And I think a lot of us would think that's quite a lot of money, particularly as you can deliver so much success through social media and engagement, and the world's changed. And but what I found was that my antennae are very acute, and I didn't realise that I understood people particularly well, but the penny suddenly dropped that I understood what was going on, and nobody had told me that I was sort of no longer on the in crowd, but I sensed it, I felt it, and I sensed that I was in the cold. And so without any conversations with anybody, there were reasons to engage with the directors. I was asked to do a particular project, and the first director that I was asked to talk to was the HR director, who was a highly political individual, and I can talk about it now because it's so long ago, but he wanted to be the CEO, and he was positioning. It was a very, very challenging situation for the board, much more so than for me. They were all fighting, basically, whether overtly or covertly. And I walked into the meeting with this chap, and I hadn't decided what I was going to do, but I looked at this set of questions that I was supposed to be asking him, and I thought, I don't think I'm going to do this. And I said to him, I don't think you want me in this business anymore. Am I right? And he just looked completely gobsmacked. He couldn't believe it. He did not know how to answer that question. And he said, well, how do you know that? So-and-so must have told you who was my boss. And I said, no, she hasn't said anything. No. But I'm right then, am I? Don't worry, we'll look after you. And it was a bit of a game changer for me, because I realised that whilst I might not be the most confident person, wasn't the most confident person, I'm still not necessarily the most confident person, but that if I follow my instincts, and I realise that my values are okay, I don't get everything right, but if my values are okay, and if my values aren't aligned with the people who I'm working with and the environment that I'm in, there's something wrong. And it's okay to follow my instincts, and it's okay to make the decision to call someone out in a nice way and basically say, I don't think that there's a match here any longer, and we don't have to wait to get fired, we don't have to resign, we can sort of actually take the mantle and make the decision.
Thank you.
That was my experience.
Great advice. Any more questions?
Yeah, there's been a few.
Thank you. Not to anyone particular, but can you...
Go on, pick on somebody. Go on.
No, I'd like to hear more, really, but can you tell me about one of your best bosses and possibly one of your worst bosses and why?
Great question. Really. Is anyone in the room here now, then? Yeah, so the question is, best boss and worst boss and why? Oh, we've got to take her right on the end. We've got to take her, Emma Louise.
Thank you. I think it's a really good question, because I think we've touched on it numerous times already. I think being inspired, working for somebody who you can look up to and respect and learn from, treating people as you want to be treated, if that's your values, that's certainly mine. I really related to that. When I started out my first ever job at Phoenix Bond Street, I had the most amazing buying director. She recently joined from Harvey Nichols, and to this day we still exchange birthday cards. She's the one woman in the world who, when she gave me feedback and it was positive, I was like, yes, I've pleased her. I really, really respected her, and I still do to this day. And I have equally had an extremely hideous boss who actually happened to be a man. But that aside, who I think was quite unique in his approach, and I would like to think I won't meet someone like that ever again, but it happens. Sometimes you have to just get out of a situation. or hope that the idiot in question trips themselves up and they end up falling out of the nest, which is what happened in this case. But yeah, I think it's a big factor, a huge factor in your journey, who you work with.
Great. Who else would like to answer that one?
I don't mind going, because when I left Asda, one of the things I did thinking about what to do next was there was a short list of 3 people over those 24 years that I always said I would love to work for that person again. It happened to be 2 guys and 1 girl. And I'm really lucky that the chief executive I work for now was on that short list. So I've worked for them before and I've worked for them again. And if I look at those 3 individuals, 2 guys and a girl, they are people that are equally interested in not just what you deliver, but how you go about delivering. It's this what and how. And they weren't taught it by anyone in particular, they just get it, and that's how they go about doing their business. So at the opposite end, worst person I've ever worked for, happened to be a guy as well, just was interested in what. Didn't matter how you got there, didn't matter how people were treated, as long as the result was in the bag, the what mattered. So I don't like working for what only people.
Good answer. Any other takers? No?
I've worked for all men and they've actually been all right.
I wanted someone to say, actually, because I thought this was on the theme. So, Denise, would you like to say, who's your best and your worst woman? No, I'm only joking. Okay, next question.
Hi, I'm just really interested for those that are working mums on the panel to understand how do you balance having a career with being a mum?
Great question. It was on there, and I knew that. I was thinking, will someone ask it? So, the mums in the crowd. Say, mums in the crowd.
Just us 2.
So.
We've got different ages as
Yes,
well.
we have.
We've got different
we go
stages
through
of
the
the journey.
ages.
Yeah. So the question is,
Start
how do
with
you
the
deal with
little
being?
one.
So the question was about how do you deal with being a mum in the work, and I think one of the questions we talked about was returning. So I don't know if anyone wants who's got the youngest?
Me.
Yeah.
So I've got a little boy who is 3.5. I have a nice affectionate way to describe how he came into the world, because I was working with Fiona at Ann Summers, and I had not long been
broadening
asked,
our experience.
had not long been asked to oversee the sex toy category, and it was not long after that yes, it all came along. Anyway. I was very lucky. I had a very good pregnancy, and I'm very aware in my leadership role that I have a lot of people who are going to go through this. I've worked alongside pregnant colleagues on and off over the years, many occasions, and I think actually for me, having gone through the experience, it helped me, because now I am very sensitive to the needs of individuals, and that they're very different, because some people will have a really bad pregnancy and some will have a great pregnancy. So I think that's helped me. But actually as a working mum, I had the misfortune at 8 months pregnant, literally almost my last day in the business, for a film crew to come in, because 50 Shades of Grey was trending at that time, and Ann Summers was doing particularly well, and they came in to film. So lots of friends who I hadn't seen for many years saw me 8 months pregnant. It's not really the time you want to be on national TV. But in addition, with a nipple clamp on my little finger. So that was a little bit of an expose, which I could have done without. But I think going back to work, my big call out is probably that it's almost impossible to predict how you will feel and when you will want to return. There is absolutely no wrong or right time. I know some people have returned very quickly, others have never returned, and the average is probably a year. I think I was going back when he was about 9 or 10 months old. It's hard. It is really hard, and I think you need the support of your family and your friends around you. It helps massively to have an understanding boss. I had a male boss at that time whose wife was also having a baby, and it was their number 2. So I was very lucky, actually, that he had a great insight into the reality of my world. And if you say on a text message at 6:30 in the morning, I've had a really bad night, I might not be in on time today. There's an understanding, and that text message is received with sympathy, and you're credited with having the conscientiousness not to be doing that unless you absolutely had to, and that you will absolutely be making up the time. And I think I probably, on reflection looking back, I was so hard on myself. I felt so guilty if I got the call from the nursery to say, he's ill. And I can remember stepping out the boardroom and saying, okay, can you just give me like an hour and a half? I can probably get there. And they said, no, Mrs. Aram, he is ill. Someone needs to collect him now. And I can remember having that whole juxtapose pull on which direction I should be focusing in. And I think my biggest learn is that goes on. And I'm obviously still only 3.5 years into being a mum and loving it. But you can't get away from that guilt. I think if you're a working mum, there's always going to be that pull on you. And if I could advise myself better, looking back, when I went back to work, don't try and be a superhero, because if you believe that you're good at what you do, you'll find a way to make it work. But you've just got to find that balance.
Thank you. More questions, brilliant.
Hi there. It's a kind of related question, actually. I was wondering if any of you had a time where you almost had to make a choice between progressing your career or potentially taking time out to have children, to, support something else in your life.
Yeah. Yes, I did, and it came on the back of actually a very long career, because I actually started working when I was 17. I didn't go to university. I started on the shop floor at Harvey Nichols at 17. I had very, very short maternity leaves, which I wouldn't do that again. I mean, Emily's here, she's 25, my son's 22. It was in the, I had my children in the days when actually I really didn't know that such thing as maternity leave was available. And that was in my employer's interests for that to be the case. And so I did rush back, having had my babies, and there were no mobile phones at that point. It was incredibly difficult, and there was no empathy for a woman's experience at a relatively senior level. But I didn't take time out. I took time out actually after I worked for Early Learning Centre. I was director at Early Learning Centre when we turned the business around from a £10 million loss to a £10 million profit. And the business was then sold to Chelsea Stores Limited before it was then sold on to Mothercare. And at that point, my main focus was, as a number of people have spoken about, the importance of your team and making sure that they're okay. Although this was a very positive experience for the business, as we all in our ways will know that any kind of change creates anxiety and concern until we understand how it's going to affect us. So I stayed through that period to see the team through, even though I knew that there wouldn't really be a future for me, because they might want the logistics director, they might want the IT director, they might want the finance, well, they certainly wanted the finance director to stay, but are they really going to want the product, brand and marketing director in a business under new leadership? No, they're going to want, so I knew that was going to be the case. I then, but that time did come to an end, and I was very appreciative subsequently that I did take a year or so out to spend time with my children, refurbish my house, spend time with my husband as well, and very fortunate to do that because a year or so later he died. And so I learned a huge life lesson out of that actually, treasure what you've got in your personal life, in your professional life, because a lot of the things that we think are important actually aren't that important in the scheme of things. And we're all immensely passionate about retail and all the rest of it, but we're not saving people's lives. And doesn't mean that it's not great and it's not important, but yes, taking some time out, sometimes it's going with your instincts again. When the time's right, do it.
And I think just going back to Leonie's point, you're going to be at work for a long time, many years, and you will reach the level that you want to reach, but it might just happen in a slightly different way. And 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, 5 years out with children, you'll still end up where you want to be, but you'll just follow a slightly different path. There's no rush. And who wants to be at the top of the organisation for too many years, because it's hard work and it can burn out, and it will all come together, and it is really hard being a mum, and you never quite get it right, and you always beat yourself up. But you can do it. You just make a series of choices and compromises and kind of get as comfortable as you can with it. There's no rush.
Thank you. There's just one more question, because again, I think we could talk all night, and the good news is we can for a little bit after. But the final question from the floor then, please.
Thank you. Hopefully it's a quick one. It's just directed at Leonie. So you talked before about the kind of benefit and value that you found and kind of solidarity from a female network. Can I ask, have you ever experienced jealousy from your male counterparts in the workplace, or is that something that varies from organisation to organisation?
I think you often get challenged when you try and place some kind of value on a female network, because the first thing the guys say is, what about us? And the obvious answer is, well, go organise it and you could have one, right? It's not that difficult to, start organising stuff to do together. Obviously, obviously a lot's gone into this evening. I think that a lot of people really challenge it. So I'm sure lots of you, when you said you were going to a women's event tonight, got a lot of, you might have got comments from men and from women, because actually people feel quite differently about things like this. People will think maybe that you are slightly vulnerable and need to go and do it. Or they might think that you're on some crazy feminist agenda and that, go the suffragettes. And I think you have to choose the path that's right for you. You have to build the network that's right for you. And for me, a female network has been hugely important. I get really inspired by women. I enjoy working with women. It's not always a positive experience. I've had, a mix of good and bad experiences working with women. But actually, the people that I have relied on most through my career are women. And I think you do begin to need each other a bit. So, I have had, the odd raised eyebrow from men and from women, from close friends and from colleagues about being part of things like this. And I think if you get something out of it, go for it. If you don't, that's all right too. But it's really about finding the people that can help you along the way, I think. I think that even if you don't feel disadvantaged as a woman at any point in your career, which I haven't particularly, you have to be really aware that lots of other people are. And I think actually the whole maternity period and having kids is one of those particular periods where I've seen a lot of I haven't got kids, but I've seen a lot of my friends really struggle with that period in their career, and to know how to handle it and to have empathetic handling of that kind of period. And so I think whether you feel disadvantaged or you don't, it's really, really valuable to work together to sort of create that network and support each other through the different things that you'll go through, whether they're particularly female related or not, to be honest. So I think it's really important, but you'll work out whether it is for you or not.
Okay, so the good news is we don't have to stop. We just need to stop this little bit. So what we're going to ask the panel to do is go over to each of the breakout areas and then encourage you to go over and please continue the conversations amongst yourself and with the panel. In the greater scheme of things, this also doesn't need to stop. If you've enjoyed this evening, you are the inaugural group of emerging leaders for women in retail, and we are so proud to have you here, and thank you very much for giving up your time this evening to come. You are now part of a community. I feel completely inspired and motivated and still hugely emotional about the real role models in the room. It's our wonderful panel. It's all the accomplished women that you work for that you see. It's the guys too, but at the moment we just want to give you a bit of extra support, if you like, until we get to the point where maybe emerging leaders is not men or women, it's both. And that may be something that you tell us that you want over the years to come. You're the future of women in retail. You're why we are all here. Thank you to the wonderful panel. So I think we'll give them a big round of applause.